Good morning, and to some of our guests today, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the Israel Infrastructure for Growth webinar. My name is Aviv. I'm with the Foreign Trade Administration at the Israel Ministry of Economy and Industry. Honored to be your moderator today. Today's webinar marks a substantial collaboration between various Israeli ministries, the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Transport and Road Safety, and of course, the Foreign Trade Administration at the Ministry of Economy and Industry. I would like to give our special thanks to Ms. Liora Adar, the Director of Europe Department at the Foreign Trade Administration, and to Mr. Oren Levdinker from the Prime Minister's Office for their significant contribution. Before we begin, please be advised that this webinar is recorded and the presentation will be shared with you upon the end of this webinar. Today's agenda includes professional presentations of prominent speakers. Each presentation will provide you a glimpse of the multi-layer program for infrastructure in Israel in the near future. You will learn today not only about the Israeli vision, but also on the practical steps each and every one of you could take in order to fulfill that vision. One more technical matter before we begin. Please pay attention that if you have any questions to one of our speakers, you should write them down in the Q&A box, and the relevant speaker will address your question in writing at the end of his or her remarks or in our Q&A session. And now, for our open remarks, I'm honored to invite Mr. Oad Cohen. Mr. Cohen is the Trade Commissioner and the Director of the Foreign Trade Administration at the Ministry of Economy and Industry. Please welcome Mr. Oad Cohen.
Thank you very much, Einav. It is my pleasure and honor to be here. And I want to thank the representative from the Israeli government, from the different ministries, especially to Oren from the Prime Minister's office, that together with Einav and Liora Adar from my office have initiated and made this seminar and webinar happening. So thanks for you. And of course, I would like to thank all the participants, especially from the foreign embassies here in Israel for their participation. Israel has been an open country for foreign investments since the first day of its establishment. Today we have foreign investments that overpassed 13 billion US dollars. Our total trade volume is more than 110 billion US dollars. And please remember that we are only a 9 million people country, so it's relatively high. The fact that Israel is also a member of the government procurement agreement under the World Trade Organization demonstrates its openness for foreign participation in public tenders. And this seminar, that it is an initiative of the Israeli government, is another demonstration for this openness. I wanna especially remark the fact that the Prime Minister's office has established a booklet that represents all the public tenders or public projects that pass 100 million Israeli shekels. And translated into English and was distributed in Israel and overseas. We have a network of 44 commercial attachés around the world that are promoting this booklet in order to encourage foreign companies to participate in Israeli tenders. So the fact that the Israeli government is, I'd say, aggressively and actively promoting the participation of foreign investors and foreign companies in public tenders, I believe demonstrates its willingness and to have foreign companies participating in Israeli tenders. Today you will hear presentations from the leading ministries that are running this project, Ministry of Environmental Protection, Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Finance, of course, the Prime Minister's office. And I think that their presentations will enlighten you, will provide you a lot of information about the tenders. And this is just the beginning. I'm sure that if you wish to have If you wish to have more information and you wish to explore the possibilities in specific tenders, then everyone, at least on the Israeli side, will be more than happy to do that. So again, I would like to thank everyone for participating on the Israeli side, and especially the guests at the foreign embassies here in Israel. And I would like to encourage that when you report home, tell about this project, because maybe you can do the same thing in your country, and by that, it will really be an open economy, a global open economy that will provide the opportunities for all companies from all around the world to participate in public tenders and projects. Thank you very much, and you have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. From one Cohen to another, Mr. Oren Cohen. Mr. Cohen is the Deputy Director General at the Prime Minister's Office. Among other things, Mr. Cohen is leading many national infrastructure projects, physical and technological, such as the National Data Lake. Today, Mr. Cohen will share with us an overview of the infrastructure sector in Israel. Mr. Cohen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I will take the following few minutes to give you an overview of the infrastructure for growth plan in Israel, and I will share the screen. And so actually the story begins pretty much 5 years ago, when the Prime Minister held a meeting with a group of senior executives from a major investment fund, one of the biggest investment funds in the world, to discuss investment opportunities in Israel. And the Prime Minister described for those senior executives Israel's intention to enhance investments in infrastructure very rapidly in the coming years. We have a very big deficit in infrastructure, almost in all sectors. And we have some major projects moving forward, and he told them how we welcome a private financing and private involvement in all those projects. So they showed a very great interest, and they asked, okay, where can we see the pipeline? Where can we see your investment agenda to see what is expected in the coming years, and where can we take part? And at that point, we looked at one another with a bit of embarrassment, because that's when we realized we don't have a national plan for our infrastructure investments. Each ministry pushed forward its own project with the treasury and other participants, but we didn't have an overall overview of our national agenda in that sense. So that's what got us moving forward on this project. And around 3 years ago, we published for the first time our infrastructure for growth national plan. And we've been updating it since then every year or so. And that's what brought us here. And I will present you with a brief overview. So the goals of the plan is to create a transparent and concentrated view of all the major infrastructure investments in Israel, everything in the pipeline, whether it already started or it's going to be executed. And we aim to improve the planning, the execution, and also the compliance with the schedules and the budget frameworks to use that transparency for this aim. The methodology of the plan is that every project that is valued above $30 million, which is roughly 100 million shekels, and it either started construction or expected to start construction between the following 5 years, and has been financially approved by the Israeli government. If you look at our recent publication from a few months ago, we're talking about more than 200 projects, roughly in the value of $70 billion. It involves 10 government ministries. And as you can see, it doesn't even include some other major projects that are going to be launched in the coming years. So this amount is going to get much higher. If you look how it is divided between different sectors, so you can see the biggest part is the investment in transportation, because that's the biggest deficit that Israel is currently suffering, and the representative from the Ministry of Transportation will elaborate that later. But you can also see there are very big investments planned in energy and water, in military infrastructure, in social services, and so on. If we will dive a bit into transportation, you can see that the biggest part is in public transportation, and also in roads and airports and seaports. And again, it doesn't include the plan to build a metro system in the Tel Aviv metropolitan, which is for now estimated at around $40 billion, and also a new international airport that Israel will need to start building in the next few years. If you look at the energy and water sector, which is the second biggest part after transportation, you can see it's combined with the various areas: electricity generation, water transmission, electrical infrastructure, and so on. Also, the representative from the ministry will elaborate more on that. And just to note, that doesn't include the private investments in exploration and production of natural gas, which in Israel is mainly offshore, and is also a very big investments that are going on. From a national overview, if we want to look at the methods of implementation and funding, so the implementation method, it's mainly contractor tender, still the vast majority, but also many projects that are combined government and contractor, or also private public partnership. You can see that those projects are only 14% of the number, but it's the biggest one. So if you look in terms of value, the value of the PPP projects is higher than 14% of the whole plan. And if you look at the funding method, you can see that around 30% is budgetary. A little less than 30% is funded by tariffs, mainly in energy and water sectors, and also a lot of combined private and public sector funding, private funding, and so on. We are trying to push forward in recent years to have more PPP projects and more reliance on combined public and private funding in order to allow us to enhance the pace of the investments even more. If you look at the major trends at all those 233 projects, you can see that, again, there's going to be a very massive investment in public and mass transportation because of the deficit. A great investment in renewable energy, because Israel, like many other countries, set a goal of increasing the share of renewable energy. Our current goal that was stated by the government is 30% by 2030. We are now less than 10%. And also investment in telecommunications network, mainly a nationwide network of 5G and fiber optic cable. So that's a general overview. If you have more questions or you need more information, feel free to contact us. And also you can find the entire plan with the schedule and the value estimates and all the necessary information in our website. And thanks again, everybody, for participating.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Please stop share screen. Thank you. It was very interesting. And thank you for that. The Ministry of Energy is a key player in the world of infrastructure. Ms. Sharon Chatzor is the Deputy Director General for Policy Planning and Strategy at the Ministry of Energy. We are very happy to have her here today. Bevakasha, Ms. Chatzor.
So hi everyone, and thank you very much. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Foreign Trade Administration and of course the Prime Minister's Office of Render that organized this wonderful webinar. And I'll share my presentation with you just in a second. All right, so in the next 10 minutes, I will try to show you a little bit of how we plan in our policy and a bit of our key policies. And then we're going to move, of course, to opportunities, investor opportunities. So this is pretty much our policy design process. And it's combined with, if you like, three lenses. First of all, we look at the main trends, and here we see the famous 3D, that the largest one, or the biggest one, the biggest tsunami is, of course, decarbonization. And this include renewable energy, going to EVs, of course, and storage. The second trend that we look at is digitalization. This include technology and data. We actually saw in the last COVID-19 how much data is important, and we think that this is also going to change the future of the energy market. And the third trend that we examine, and this is the hardest one for an Israeli to pronounce, called decentralization. And this one is include going from big power plants, big power station to a small rooftops PV. So this is the first one. We look at the main trend, then we look at our local perspective, the Israeli market and its unique characteristic. Israel is, of course, an energetic island, also one of the threatened countries in the world. We get a high population density. We don't have a lot of land, but we do have a lot of sun, and it's about it. We don't have any water or wind or geothermal resources. And of course, we got breakthrough innovation. Israel is the startup nation, and this is one of our biggest adventures. And the last one is, of course, a significant gas reserve, and I'll talk about it later. So we look at the main trend, and we look at the local perspective, and then we look at our duty, and we have to make sure that every policy we set is standing on 3 legs. First of all, we have to maintain energy security and, of course, financial continuity. Then we have to look at environment and see that we are reducing carbon footprint and, of course, air pollution. And the third leg is, of course, economy. We have to make sure that our policy is remaining a competitive market and affordable prices. So where it leads us for a few policies that we try to achieve in the last years. First of all, we are phasing out coal. Back in 2015, Israel used to generate 60% out of the electricity out of coal, and we are planning of going to 0 by 2025. We want to go to 30% renewable energy by 2030. Right now, we are about 10% of the generation. Regional cooperation, we are planning of becoming one of the big energy nations. So I'm going to talk about it later, by exporting gas, but also looking east to the Emirates and etc. Natural gas exploration is, of course, one of our biggest policy. Future mobility, going to EVs, and the last one is, of course, investing in R&D. And those are the main ones. We got a lot more, but this is the main one. And if you look at the chart that I show here, you can actually see how the Israeli market is transforming from coal to renewables. So, as I said before, I think that when you look at the characteristic of the business ecosystem in Israel, and especially in energy, you see competitive markets, you see a lot of human capital, you see encouraging regulation. Also, we think that our regulation is encouraging, and of course, you see ambitious goals, and this is lead us for great opportunity for investment. So the first one that I'm going to talk is about natural gas. We are expecting a big round for offshore natural gas and oil exploration. Of course, we see export in natural gas. Right now, Israel is exporting gas to Egypt and also to Jordan. We are promoting gas pipeline to Europe, and also we established with Egypt the gas forum, the regional gas forum. Then, of course, we will continue the conversion of industry to natural gas, and of course, further develop an extending of natural gas grid. Speaking on electricity, we see 2 main markets. First is renewable. As I mentioned before, we're going up to 1,200 megawatt. This is a triple, 3 times the capacity that we have right now, and more than 6,000 megawatt of storage. This is I don't know. We have right now almost nothing, and of course everything will be in tenders and with fixed tariff. This is it's a huge opportunity for companies to approach. And the second one is, of course, our power station. Here you got 3 power stations that will go up to the market shortly. And the third opportunity is, of course, supporting R&D. You can see here a lot of our program by supporting pioneer and demonstration, academia, startup fund. You got here the Bird Fund with the US. So we got a lot of opportunities going to R&D. And in the end, I think that this map is showing a little bit of the opportunity that we think. So we talked about electricity, we talked about natural gas, we talked about R&D, and of course also in transportation, we see also a lot of opportunities. So it's about it. This is of course companies that work right now in Israel. There's plenty of more, and please join us. We have special website that you can actually see all the opportunities inside, and just feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to assist. So thank you very much again for everything that everyone that organized this webinar. And thank you for participate, and we hope to see you soon, maybe face to face someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chatzor. Hopefully we'll soon meet face to face. The future of energy definitely look exciting. And for all of our participants, I want to remind you that the recording and all presentation we'll share with you upon the end of this webinar. While COVID-19 has dramatically changed our life, turning our homes into our new offices, the Ministry of Transport and Road Safety is continuing to pave our way back to the real office. Mr. Asaf Asher is the Acting Deputy Director General for Infrastructure and Coordination at the Ministry of Transport and Road Safety. Mr. Asher, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this great opportunity to talk to you all today. As you said, I hope that next time it will be face-to-face and not on the webinar, but let's start. My name is Asaf. I'm the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Transportation, and to try to understand what we are doing today in the field of infrastructure, we need to first understand the problem or the challenge that Israel is facing with the transportation infrastructure. So today, we have a lot of projects and a lot of challenges because Israel is a country with, just a minute. Okay. Israel is one of the OECD.
Asaf, can you share your screen? Share the presentation, sorry.
You see the presentation?
Yeah, but you're not presenting it.
You see the presentation?
For this?
Einav?
What, sorry?
Do you see the presentation?
Yeah. Stop share your screen and then Ariel will share it for you. 1 second.
Let me try once again.
Okay.
Do you see the presentation?
Yeah, but you need to present it like. Okay, you can continue like that. It's okay. Just share it.
So let's try once again.
Please share it once again.
I'll try it once again. Can you see that?
Yeah, you continue like that. Thank you.
Okay. So as I started to tell you about the transportation challenge we are facing today, Israel has a deficit of infrastructure, of transport infrastructure. And the most important thing to understand that Israel is considered by OECD standard to be a country that is good in the economy field and has good schools and had good rate in the OECD, but a birth rate of a developing country. That means that we need a lot of infrastructure in order to straight the line with the OECD standard. That means we need to make an efficient and accessible and sustainable transport system. We're doing so by planning 6 main strategic plans that needs to look at the years 2040, and then to decide how we're going to build the transport infrastructure in order to meet those challenges. Some of these plans are geographical. That means they are zooming up on a strategic place and build a plan. Some of them are dealing with a specific topic like roads or railways in Israel. From that, we are doing smaller plans that are dealing with the 5 years plan that we need to do in order to get to what we will want to go. Enough, can we move the presentation?
Asaf, you control the presentation.
אסף, פשוט תלחץ F5.
אתם רואים אותה?
כן, תלחץ F5 והיא תהיה מוצגת לך.
Okay. So as I started to talk about the 6 main strategic plans for land transport system, as I said, some of them are geographical, some of them have a specific topic, and that way we can build the 5-year plan that we are using in order to meet our goals. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the railway plan. We have, as you see, a lot of interesting and exciting projects. Some of them are being built right now. Some of them are at plan. You can see 2 high-speed tracks from Haifa to Tel Aviv, which will be able us to take train from Haifa or from Tel Aviv without any stop. High-speed tracks that will allow us to get in half of the time from the trains that we are using today. A project in Tel Aviv. Today we have only 3 main lines in Tel Aviv. We are building and planning today the 4th one, and in the near future we'll be able to start to plan and build the 5th and the 6th line in order to separate the suburban lines from the fast line in the future. One more important project is the connection between Tel Aviv and Be'er Sheva, the main metropolitan in the south of Israel, and that will be able us also to allow some of the main bases in Israel that are moving today from the central part of Israel to Be'er Sheva, and we'll be able to also help the people from Be'er Sheva to go to Tel Aviv and to the center of Israel in a very short time. One other very interesting project that we are starting to think and plan today is because we just signed a peace agreement with the Arab states of Dubai and Bahrain. We can use already exist train line between Haifa, the main port of Israel, and the east part of Israel to the city of Bet Shean, to extend this railway and to move goods and containers all over the Middle East, from the Gulf into the port of Haifa, and from there to the Mediterranean Sea, and it will be able to expand the network of commodities between Arab state, Israel, and Europe. Two other main projects that we are dealing today is with the extension of the line that already been built between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, in the center of Jerusalem, to allow passengers and to tourists to come from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv back and forth. And the last one in the heavy train project is the expansion of Ben Gurion, the main airport of Israel. It will transform the Ben Gurion airport into a hub, and all the main lines of the train will move through Ben Gurion, and allow also the people who get to Israel to use the train in order to get anywhere, and to the population in Israel to move inside the country by train. All those projects, of course, comes with more projects that are combining the train station into the last mile of the passenger, that come with bike lanes and roads and everything that includes. Of course, it comes with also the purchase of new trains and locomotives, and all the other stuff that we need in order to operate the train. The main project that we are dealing right now in the central of Israel is the LRT. It's the light rail transit. It's a project that estimated in almost $50 billion US. The red line, which is building right now, and is supposed to start to be operate and moving people by the end of next year. Half of it is underground because it's moved under Tel Aviv, and in order not to deal with all the traffic lights and all the complexity that involves moving in a big city, and it's not very usual that light train is going underground, but the red line do so. Two other lines that are being planned and built right now. It's the purple line that take passenger from the central of Tel Aviv into the eastern part of the metropolitan, and the green line, which allows people to go from the north of the metropolitan, Herzliya, through Tel Aviv and all the way to Holon and Rishon, that are located in the south part of the metropolitan. Those are two important projects that we are dealing with right now, and the most of our focus right now is on them. If we are talking about the future, we talked about the 6 strategic plans and how we taking those plans and doing a 5-year plan in order to set the goals. There is no doubt that the project that we are going to deal with in the next 10 years, it's the metro. Oren Cohen already talked about it. I will be happy if it will sign up in $40 billion US, but probably will be much more. To all of you that are listening right now, this is the cue to wake up, because the metro has a lot of opportunities for countries and investors to be a part of this massive project. As you can see the dates on the slide, we will need a lot of PMO designers and all the people who can help us with the plan, and then all the things that are related to the execution. It's a massive, massive project. Israel is not used to this kind of project in transportation, and it has also a financial structure that I'm sure that Ilya from the Ministry of Finance will explain later, but it's a very challenging project, and I'm sure all of you can find a part of to help us and to be a part of this creation. A few other projects that are being built right now, some of them are in Jerusalem, also a light train. Jerusalem is the first city that has a light train that already operates. Now we do the extension and building the green line from the south part to the north part. And in the future, also a blue line. And all the other lines will come in the next 10 years in order to meet the demands for using this kind of light rate system. Two other projects that are also important, and we are about to finish them in the next couple of years. The two main ports of Israel, Ashdod and Haifa, the main gates from Israel to the sea, to container ship in order to come to Israel. We build two great ports that are about to finish in a couple of years from now. And now we are facing the connection between the ports and the cities with the main road system, also in Haifa and also in Ashdod. As you can see, there are a lot of companies that works with us in order to make this vision a reality. And these are all the way to connect also our companies that work with the Ministry of Transportation. And you can always talk to us. We will be willing to share information and think with you together how you can be a part with this project. Thank you very much.
Toda, Mr. Asher. Before we continue, a kind reminder, if you have any further questions for our speakers, please do not hesitate and write them down in English in the Q&A box. And I'm happy to share with you that we have today in our session over than 200 participants from more than 30 countries in 5 continents. Our discussion on Israeli infrastructure sector cannot be complete without diving into the PPP world. I'm happy to introduce Mr. Itzik Marmelstein, the head of infrastructure and PPP projects at the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Marmelstein, please feel free to start sharing your screen.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you, Einav, and thank you, Foreign Trade Administration, for having me in this webinar. What I want to discuss in my presentation is, first of all, to tell you about a thorough examination of the infrastructure sector that we have done at the Ministry of Finance some 2 years ago. And afterwards, I want to go into details and tell you how we moved forward from this examination, and to talk about current project that we have in Israel, and that we will be very happy that you come and participate in this project. So first of all, what we did. 2 years ago, as I said, we've done a thorough examination together with McKinsey to see how we perform in Israel in the infrastructure market in comparison to other countries in the world. And what we saw is that the infrastructure stock in Israel as a percentage of the GDP is lower than others. What do I mean by lower? I mean by the Israel infrastructure stock in GDP is 50%, while in the OECD is roughly 71%. What does it mean? It means that we underperform in telecommunication, in water, and in energy, as I'll show you. Another thing that we do is we wanted to find out how can we move forward? If we want to reach to the level of other nations in the world, what do we need to do? And we saw that today we are investing roughly $8 billion a year in infrastructure. And we saw that if we are going to maintain the same infrastructure investment, we are going to deteriorate in how we stand in comparison to other nations. If we'll in order to achieve a same level of infrastructure like the rest of the world, we need to double our investment. If we want to reach from point C to point A, we need to double our investment from $8 billion a year to $16 billion a year. We moved forward. We wanted to know, because when you say I want to invest in infrastructure, infrastructure is a very wide market. You can invest in many different areas. And what we wanted to see is in which sector do we underperform and in which sectors are we okay. And what you can see here is we took the infrastructure market and we separated to different sectors: transport, ports, airports, power, and telecom. And where you see where the green bars are is where we perform well in comparison to the world. And in the red bars is where we perform relatively low. So in the transport sector, you can see that actually we have, although Israelis like to complain about traffic jams, we actually have enough roads in Israel. Where our problem lies is with rails, heavy and light rails. And I think you all saw it now in Asher's presentation that we are now investing heavily in rails in Israel. We saw that in ports, in airports, we're actually quite okay, and we don't need to further invest. But in the power, in telecom, in water, we need to highly invest in order to achieve a good level of infrastructure, which allows us to increase, obviously after hopefully after the coronavirus pandemic, to achieve economic growth. And what I want to show you now is, after we little bit seen how do we perform, is how we took it forward. What are we doing next in order to be better in infrastructure in Israel? So first of all, regarding PPP projects, which I'm not sure if everyone are familiar with this method. PPP projects are a way to establish infrastructure projects with the private sector. PPP stands for public-private partnerships. It means projects that the state of Israel is doing with the private sector and with different financiers. So in the last, I say 20 years, Israel has invested roughly 15 billion NIS in PPP projects around the different sector. You can see here energy, construction, environment, transportation, and desalination. And right now, in the coming years, only on those years, we have roughly 53 billion NIS in different projects, in different status all around Israel, some of them pre-tender, some of them in tender, and some of them are on financial closure. But what I want to show here is that we are doing now in only 2-3 years what we've done till now in 20 years. And this is a huge leap that we are doing forward, because we believe in this method and we want to boost our investment in infrastructure. So this is one thing. Another thing that we've done is that we've learned how to do those projects much quicker and much better. And you can see here, this is an example from the timeline that we did in Sorek B. Sorek B is a desalination plant, I think the largest in the world. And we can see that during the time in the desalination sector in Israel, we've learned a lot on how do we do PPP projects. If in Hadera or in Sorek A project, it took approximately 5 years from the governmental resolution until we've started construction. Nowadays in Sorek B, we've done it only in 2 years. And you can see it across all our tenders, because what we did is that we have learned a lot, and we are doing as much as we can standardization in our project. And also what I want to to stress in this point is that everyone asks me how is the PPP in Israel works, if it works the same like the world, how our tender law is working. And for me, the best answer is that we have in a lot of our projects, the European Investment Bank funding. The European Investment Bank comes to Israel and invests in our projects only after he's doing a thorough examination of the way we work, our legal system, and he is a current member in our project. And this is for me a way to tell you that we have a very robust and very good method of PPP and tenders project in Israel, which you are very welcome to participate. But I don't want to leave it just in general terms. I want to show you what do we have in the coming years in the PPP project. And this obviously also very important for foreign investors, because one of the things that we have understood during the examination that we did with McKinsey is that the private sector needs to know what lies ahead and what is the pipeline in the next project in Israel in order in order to be able to invest in Israel. They need certainty and they need pipeline, and we do understand that. And therefore, I'm sharing this in this presentation, but also this presentation also be shared with you, but we are constantly publish in our website our future project for foreign companies to know what are we doing and that they can come here. So I don't need to read it because you can see it, but we have a lot of projects coming in the next couple of years. Here you can see a few projects. We have an international airport that we are planning to start in a year and a half, which is a project of roughly 1.5 billion NIS. We have another solar project in Ashalim. We have a natural gas-fired power plant that we are planning to initiate the PQ publication, the pre-qualification, the first stage in the next few months. This is a project of almost 5 billion NIS. We also started doing PPP projects in the building administration. You can see governmental offices and the governmental court complex, governmental teleprocess complex. All those projects amount to roughly 1.5 billion NIS project. And we have a lot of other projects. We have light rails, and I won't repeat what Asaf already told you about light rails. We have the fast lanes in Tel Aviv. We have Haifa Nazareth light rail that is just being published. We have another desalination facility, water treatment, Dimona, and also waste treatment facility. All this information regarding those projects, estimate timetables, participation, you can find in our website. There is you'll have at the end a link to our pamphlet in this regard. And also please feel free to contact us or to ask your companies to contact us. We are very looking forward for foreign investors and foreign companies to come and do business in Israel. Here we have also shared our personal phones and our emails. Please feel free to contact us if you have questions regarding a specific tenders, and we will answer shortly. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Einav and Foreign Trade Ministry for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mermelstein. And now to our last, but definitely not least, Mr. Ilya Katz. Mr. Katz is the head of mass transportation sector at the budget department within the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Katz, bevakasha. Can you open your mic, please?
1 second, I'll share the screen. Okay, can see it?
No, we're still waiting for you to share your screen.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you for having me. Well, I'll go over some macro perspective that we have here in the Ministry of Finance regarding the Infrastructure for Growth program. As you know, COVID-19 had and still has a very significant effect on the economy. In mid-March, Israel was one of the first countries to go to a national lockdown. And in mid-September, we were the first country to go to a second lockdown. And currently, we are also at a lockdown that hopefully will end soon. This had a very significant effect on Israel, with a deficit growing to very high levels, highest we had in more than 3 decades. But on the positive side, given the robust structure of the economy and the effect and measures done by the government, the overall impact of the COVID on the economy was relatively small compared to other countries, with growth rates declining at lower rates than other countries had. This, I think, puts us in a good position in an international perspective to look forward at what needs to be done. And as previously mentioned, both by all our panelists, we have a very large infrastructure gap, and it's a widespread understanding that is being backed by analysis both by the World Bank and the Bank of Israel, that Israel needs to invest in infrastructure in order to boost the economy. And even though we are in a economical crisis, or maybe even because of that, now it's the time to invest in infrastructure. And we can see it both by the low level of interest rates that weren't very much affected by the crisis, and also justify for us why we should invest now and not delay our investment for later on. And during the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, the infrastructure sector continued working almost as usual, giving to the wide understanding of how vital this sector is for the Israeli economy. Not only that, but the Ministry of Finance, together with the other ministries, transportation, energy, and etc., we prepared acceleration plans in order to help the economy deal with the crisis. Those acceleration plans try to make lemonades out of the lemon, and use the fact that the roads were empty and the train wasn't working, and we basically accelerated projects that were planned for future years and started them now, did them faster than what was planned in order to increase the productivity of the economy and improve the level of services to citizens and businesses. Those acceleration plans were focused on infrastructure, again, because of the wide understanding of how important this sector is. As Asaf Asher mentioned, one of the largest challenges in the infrastructure field is the Tel Aviv Metro project. That's a project that we believe could change the country. It's a huge project, 150 kilometers of a metro network with very large benefits that this project could bring to the economy, both from agglomeration and the saving of travel times and other sorts of benefits this project will bring to the metropolitan and to the rest of the country. This project was analyzed by Israeli professionals and international companies, and we found that it has a very high yield on return and return on investment, and we definitely believe that we should do it as soon as possible. If we look at the overall budget perspective for mass transportation projects, then the upcoming 5 years, we expect that the total budget for mass transportation project will almost double itself. And that it's very impressive if you keep in your mind that we already almost tripled our budget for mass transportation in the previous 5 years. So that's really like proves our focus to this sector and to infrastructure as a whole. Those investments are current with our strategic plan for public transportation, which sets not only investment goals, but also service and usage goals for the country as a whole, and as Asaf mentioned, for the different metropolitans in Israel. We understand that it's not enough to invest funds in infrastructure to make them happen or to set goals, but we also need to do them in a wise manner. And as Itzik mentioned, we plan to do a lot of projects through different participation, with different participation of the private sector, with PPP kind of scams. And also, we are focused on basically helping the companies or helping the different line ministries in solving barriers to execute projects. Those barriers include infrastructure coordination and other regulatory obstacles the projects have. And just to give an example, the Ministry of Finance has recently established headquarters for infrastructure coordination, which will help the different companies in order to make the infrastructure coordination in a much more effective way, so we could execute the projects as fast as possible. So just to conclude what I said and before me, we all understand that it's vital for Israel to invest in infrastructure. I think all the panelists have proven that. And we also understand that in a fiscal and macro aspect, Israel is in a good position to do this kind of investments. Over the next decade, there is a very large pipeline of projects that we intend to execute. And the government of Israel is preparing both the funds and the regulatory framework in order to execute those projects. We need foreign companies' capabilities and know-how in order to succeed in doing those projects. And therefore, we welcome your participation in our tenders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katz, and thanks again to all our speakers for their enlightening presentations. I'm sure we all learned something new today. And now for our Q&A session. We got a lot of questions. Some were already answered through our Q&A box, and to some we will let our speakers to address them now. Our first question is to Ms. Hatzor. Given the geographical latitude, sun energy should theoretically be more present in your energy mix. What are the main obstacles to harness the solar power in Israel?
I think you answered the question. So I wrote it down. So I'm just going to read it to you because the answer can be 2 hours long, but I'll try to make it short. So Israel, as I mentioned, Israel is making a huge step toward moving to renewable energies in order to diversify our energy mix. And our goal is go to 30% by 2030. Israel is a very sunny country, as I mentioned, but Israel does not have a lot of water resources that, to produce electricity, and our wind potential is very low, and we don't have any nuclear energy, or we do not connect to any other countries in Europe, for example. Furthermore, as I mentioned, we are a very small country and we don't have a lot of land resources. And it's important also to mention that our population growth is one of the fastest one in the developed country, and our GDP and our standard of living are, of course, growing very fast, as well as our demand for electricity in the near future. In order to match those growing dimensions, but also move toward renewables, with the understanding that solar energy is not very stable sources, and the sun, unfortunately, does not raise at night and in the winter. We are investing a lot in developing storage technologies. Taking all this in account, in the next few years, we are going to publish more, or I say all, of our tenders with a request for a storage solution. We're gonna do every PV, or almost every PV tender will combine with storage. And as technology is processing and go further, we are hope to raise our target for renewable and even higher. As we did before, if we see the technology is moving furthermore, and we are, excuse me, and we got our targets, I'm sure that we will raise it up by 2030.
Thank you. Another question for you, Ms. Hatzor, from the Embassy of Poland in Tel Aviv. Assuming huge natural gas reserves in Israel, are you elaborating hydrogen strategy? If yes, what kind of investment you plan in this sector? Some initiatives, instruments, or business support, etc.?
We do see hydrogen as a fuel of the future, and of course, it can work really good to the Israeli market, as you mentioned, with our gas reserve. And we invest a lot of effort in developing a new Israeli technology on the subject. We're also planning to publish our strategy plan for 2050, and hydrogen, of course, is a big part of it. And those are a few projects. There are also a few projects that in pilot that in the field of hydrogen, and we are hopefully they will be a successful one, and we can actually go further more with this.
Thank you. Now a question to Mr. Asher. One of our participants wanted to know more about the Air Hub plans. Can you elaborate a bit?
Yeah, sure. So the hub that we talked about in the Ben Gurion Airport, the main airport of Israel, is a hub for transportation. That means that we're going to connect all the main transportation systems in order to set up a place for the rain to connect with the highways and the airport. That doesn't mean that we are going to expand the airport itself. In that matter, the only positive thing that came up from the coronavirus is that the low number of people that are using currently the Ben Gurion Airport, because as we expected by 2023, the airport was supposed to get to its maximum volume, and that would mean that we need to start to build a new airport. I think Itzik started to talk about that in the PPP, and we are thinking today where is the best location for the new airport. Some of the specialists suggest we'll do it in the north. Some of them are thinking we need to do it in the south, but also in that aspect, we will start to build a new airport in the years to come. But if we are talking about the hub, what I have mentioned earlier was that we're talking about the hub for the connection of all the transportation methods in one place.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. Ilya, you want to say something about this too, or can continue? Mr. Katz?
No, thank you.
Okay. So for our last question to Mr. Marmelstein, is there a decision on how will the metro be executed? Will be PPP or something else?
No, there is not a decision yet, but I believe that this project will be, part of it will be done through PPP and part of it will done by governmental companies, but there is not a decision yet.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Marmelstein. We have
Enough, if I can add to that, to what Itzik said, there is currently an RFI that is available that NETA published. It's available up until the end of February, and it's a huge project that will have a lot of tenders involved in it, and we'll be happy to hear from different companies what their thoughts on this issue.
Thank you for this comment. We have reached the end of our webinar. My sincere thanks to all our speakers and to you, our guests. The Foreign Trade Administration and all our head of economic missions around the globe will be glad to connect you to the relevant personnel in Israel. Our economic representatives are spread in 50 international diplomatic offices, offers a wide range of services, and could be your bridge to your next success story. Thanks again for taking the time to learn more about the Israeli infrastructure plans for the future. I hope that you found it interesting as I did. I wish you all a wonderful day. Stay safe. Shalom ותודה רבה.